Hello, hello, Gutsy Women on this lovely Monday afternoon in the United Kingdom. I hope everyone's well and happy and enjoying the day. Today we have the very lovely Lucille Barkman. Lucille is a mentor and professional listener, I believe, is what she calls herself. So that's really intriguing in itself. So I'm really looking forward to speaking to you, Lucille, about what that actually means. So welcome to the stage. Can you tell people who you are, where you're from, and what is it that got you to doing what you're now doing?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Um, I am Lucille Barkman. I was born in northern Alberta on a homestead 50 some years ago. I came home from the hospital on the back of a wagon in a box, in a paper box. They didn't have car seats back in those days. And that's a long time ago. And I am now starting up a new business that feels like something that will make me happy, something that has been inside of me and is now time to come out. I started I started doing this. No, I became aware that I could do something with my life that would be more fulfilling than what I was currently doing. Last July, on July 22nd, I had an interview with a woman that I had been following for a while, and she was offering free interviews to women who wanted to expand their lives, do something, had a feeling that they needed to do something more. And I've had that feeling for many years, but had no idea what it was. I recently had come to understand that this feeling was not going to be happy with just if I found the right job. And I would be in conversations with women about, what could I do? What's out there? You don't know what's out there unless you ask questions, and a lot of frustration around that. And, that alone causes anxiety and frustration and, hopelessness because, life just isn't a lot of fun when you're doing something you don't enjoy. So after the interview I had with her, and she literally said, "Yes, you can do something with that feeling you have on the inside." That was the happiest I think I've ever been in my life. Like I just couldn't believe it that, the feeling was amazing. And so that's when I started. I found a local coach that I knew here to help me. She helped business women, elevate to the next level. We started talking about what I can do. Partly I was working as a personal concierge, and so we were going to work on building that. But then when I was done with her and I moved on to a coach that actually, well, I had another free interview with another coach, and she helped me realize what I actually could do, and hence my mentoring and professional listening business started. And so I work from my personal experience. About 20 some years ago, I went through a messy separation and divorce. My ex-husband got involved with my first cousin. We all went to the same church. So it was, her husband and kids, me and my kids, and our spouses getting involved with each other, and not a lot of support. Like I like what do you do? Going to counseling wasn't, well, people didn't, 20 years ago, people weren't going to a lot of counseling to seek help as much as they would be now. And it wasn't really, looked upon as a good thing to do in the church system that I came from. So for many years, I was just kind of floundering around till I finally decided, okay, I am going to go to counseling because I can't deal with this all on my own, the separation and the divorce and it was like a roller coaster to hell. Like I lost weight. You just had this yuck feeling all the time inside of you because your life is just bad. And we also, divorce was not an option, or divorce and remarriage was not an option where I came from. Though eventually he did divorce me, and I was not excommunicated for being a divorcee. I was excommunicated later on when I left the church and did not repent and come back.
Mm.
So, during that period of my life, in the first 10 years, maybe 8 to 10 years, I had no concept of, like, I lived my life in a straight line. Like, it didn't go, in a way, it didn't go up and down. It was just straight line. Emotionally, I didn't feel much. I didn't experience much. I think it was in my body, the yuck thing in my body, in my stomach, kind of. You just always felt bad. And I lost weight, which is not good when you're under stress, but I felt good because I lost weight.
I know there always seems to be that's the swings and roundabouts, isn't it? You think, like, actually I'm looking better, I'm probably feeling better in one aspect, but in other aspects there was still lots and lots of work to do. And I imagine when you were going through something like that, Lucille, that there was a lot of other stuff going on up here in your thought processes. And especially when you're in a very close-knit community in a church, and everybody seems to know everybody. It's all, what kind of thoughts were going around in your head around what people might think, or all of that kind of stuff? Because I'm guessing some of this feeds now into what you're now doing.
Well, I am looking back now and how I was feeling. One of the things I want to talk about here is that years later, I realized that I had something called CEN, which is childhood emotional neglect. There's a book written by Dr. Jonas Webb, Running on Empty. She explains that. And when I read her book, I realized that's what was going on. I was completely emotionally shut down. I had no feelings, really. I didn't feel anger. I don't cry. I didn't cry. I still don't cry a lot. And I think in one way, that's what helped me keep my sanity, because there was so much trauma going on, and being single parenting and lawyers, and the ex-husband, he attacked me one night and ended up getting arrested. And when I think back now, had I actually been feeling all of that, I don't know if I would have survived. Because many people I'm sure do, but it's just like, in a way, I think the being emotionally shut down actually helped me survive those first years until I slowly began to realize that I was emotionally shut down, and began to wake up. And I still sometimes feel like feeling things and being emotional is a bit annoying, because you have you go more like this rather than you're just even keel. But yeah, the fear, I think the fear that's involved, and the shame, the shame of, I don't know if so much around my marriage falling apart, but leaving my faith, the shame that I would bring to my parents. I was the bad daughter, and I felt that way for a long time, because my relationship with my parents was before I left the church. It was shortly after my husband left. All of a sudden, my relationship with my parents completely disintegrated. And even to this day, I don't completely understand why. I could not hardly tolerate being around them. I think part of the reason was that as a very young child, I became their parent, taking care of them and keeping them happy. because, you know, there was no emotional connection between us. They were not able to connect with me emotionally, you know, and so in order to receive love, maybe, you know, I became the child that takes care of the parent and making sure they're happy and trying to do my best to keep them happy. You know, and that all of a sudden fell apart, because one of the things I thought about then was that could be part of the reason that the disconnect became so great. If I was playing the parent to my parents, when a parent is going through a tough time, you don't talk to your children. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You know, so why would I talk to my parents about what was going on? Because I'd been their caregivers,
Mm. Yes.
emotionally, kind of.
Yeah. The roles were reversed
Yeah.
in that respect. And I would imagine that somewhere deep inside is that thought of, well, I have to keep it together because they now tend to rely on me somewhere, whether that was consciously or subconsciously. There may well have been something that, you know, happens to a child when they're going through that particular, you know, when you say that everything's just flat, the only time emotions are ever flat is when we're dead, when we're flatline. You see it on the screen when somebody
Yeah,
dies,
that's an interest. I like that.
because there's no moments of real joy. There's no
Yeah.
real despair. And how can we live without contrast somehow? And, you know, would you say that you becoming the caregiver then was, maybe there's an element of trauma response within that to get certain needs met, would you say? Or
Well, yeah, I do, you know, from what I understand, yes, I do think that you know, I was always the good child. I didn't rock the boat until I was, you know, in my 40s, and then I rocked the boat, like, on everything that I got brought up with, you know, that I was brought up to do. My marriage fell apart. I left the, you know, I left the church that I'd grown up in, and that that was traumatic.
Mm.
Because, you know, when you leave a community, that close-knit community, you leave all your friends behind, and you take your children and you are raising them. Every decision you make is considered sin. From, you know, from what I had been brought up, all the choices I've made, the way we dressed, listening to music, watching movies, going to the movies, like, that was all wrong. You didn't do that kind of thing, you know? And so that's tremendous stress on your body, because yes, you walked away, you did the right thing, but then you have to navigate the new way. And when over here it's telling you that you're doing wrong, you're bringing shame to your family, you're not keeping the people in the church happy any longer. And that's a lot of trauma to hold, and sadness and aloneness to hold in your body.
Definitely.
You
Definitely.
know, and I think for me, I would have kept it here in my midsection, maybe in my throat. That's where the feeling would have been,
Mm-hmm.
more than actually outward feeling. Because I think I think my ex-husband actually thought that I didn't care that our marriage fell apart.
Mm.
But it wasn't that I didn't care, I just couldn't express it.
Mm. Mm. And that's quite profound, because in order to, if we keep the research is out there, that if we keep things tucked inside so deeply, that will continue to have negative impact on the cells of your body, because the cells, there's a well-known saying that the body keeps the score.
Mm-hmm.
And that can
There's a
lead
book
to,
called that.
yes, the body keeps the score.
Yeah.
And it's a very good book. If anyone who's listening to this interview hasn't read it, please go and look it up. If you've got a chronic health condition and you're listening to this, I would really highly recommend you get a hold of that book, because this really explains a lot of what our emotional and psychological impact has on our physical body. And I would imagine that that had some level of impact on your physical health as well. So the fact that you said you couldn't say anything until you were in your 40s, and then it all like a pressure cooker exploding and it all came out. And so that's a really interesting point, isn't it? That up to that point, there was something stuck here and in here that you just couldn't express. And yet it was all being held. It's quite a fascinating thing to start to.
I remember way back, long before I knew anything about this whole body, you know, what happens to the body physically from trauma and all that. I remember, I don't know, reading or hearing somebody say that you can get cancer from stress in your life, something to that effect. And it's just like, and it's interesting because in those first years, the first, I don't know, 10 years of my life, or 10 years of the, you know, once everything went to pot on me, my body functioned. I didn't experience a lot of problems or anything like that. And I think maybe the first thing that I began to realize was was tiredness, and how that, and I quit doing one of the things that I still do, but I did a lot of. I was a stay-at-home mom at the time. You know, doing yard work, landscaping, gardens, and that kind of thing was something that I really enjoyed. And as I began to get more tired and more, you know, single parenting on my own and keeping my household running, you know, that started to slow down, you know, which was surprising in a way, because that was something I liked to do, but I didn't have the stamina to keep that all up anymore. And I think tiredness was probably one of the first things that started to go for me. And then I was at the library. I don't even know how I came across this book at the library, but I came across the book When Your Body Says No by Dr. Gabor Mate. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Oh, I absolutely love the man.
Yeah, and you
He's
know, and I've
amazing.
been to a
Such
couple
an
of the
amazing guy.
workshops,
Mhm.
and so I started reading that book, and that's when I began, you know, that this whole thing fascinates me, the stress, and this is what comes from it, and the diseases that you can get from out of that, you know. And I've worked, you know, I've followed a few other people you know, that talk about how, what is it, 75 to 98% of our illnesses come from our stress and our minds and our beliefs. And
yes, that's it. That's it. And we don't realize a lot of the time. And we keep taking certain medications and trying to eat the right things. And yet one of them, like you say, 78% of what is actually physically happening in our bodies, good or bad, is around mind and emotions.
yeah.
And I think it's fascinating that you said that you had this complete like shutdown, childhood emotional neglect that shut down any feeling. So in one respect, you may have had the thoughts, but the feelings were detached from the thinking.
Yeah.
Because of that condition that you had. And maybe I'm just surmising here, maybe that had an impact on the fact that your body didn't do any more shutting down than it could have done, because you didn't have the emotion feeding into the thinking at the same time.
Maybe that is, yeah. But it definitely has caught up with me. Then 5.5 years ago, my daughter was killed in a horrific car accident. And that was November 1st, 2019, and March 2020 was when pandemic happened. I didn't have a problem with the pandemic happening and having to stay at home, because I was just ready to do nothing.
Mm.
I had been off for 3 months after my daughter's accident, and I had just gone back to work for about 6 weeks, and then the world shut down. So it gave me time to just, I didn't have to do anything. I could just do nothing. And then about 3 years later, the store where I worked at that point, had to close because, pandemic, stores closed. And I decided at that point that I was not going to jump on the first job that I had access to, because I was able to have unemployment for almost a year after we closed. But I remember that the same company had different stores, and there was 3 openings, and I made the decision not to try and get another job, but at the same time I was scared not to, because that's what we do. We work so we have money. So I went and I applied for two of the positions. And then I realized, like, no, that's not what I'm going to do. So I didn't accept any of the interviews. And after I made that decision, I had to work for 2 weeks yet till everything was shut down. And when I made the decision not to move ahead for another job, my body crashed. I literally crashed. And when I drove to work for those next 2 weeks, I literally could not drive faster than 80 kilometers an hour down the road. Like people passed me. I just could not, I did not have the gumption to go any faster. And I was seeing a naturopath. I had been seeing a naturopath through that time already. And I've spent a lot of money visiting a naturopath and she's the one that has got me. What is that now? 4 years ago, I think, that I crashed. And I am in a much better place health-wise, then menopause and all that great stuff comes in there, hormones.
We're blessed, aren't we? We're blessed.
Well, I actually had a hysterectomy because of some complications, but yes. That's another whole story, the menopause.
Oh, yeah, definitely, definitely. Lucille, you've been through so much, and yet the fact that your body crashed at that point really emphasizes this mind-body connection, and how we really need to release emotion, release limiting beliefs, release the anxiety, release the fears and the stresses. That's it. Your story's just actually really highlighted that. And so if I was to say to you, out of everything that's happened, like the religious stuff that went on, the shaming and all of that went on, the divorce, your childhood with your parents, out of all of that, what would you say has made you actually recognize, like, what are your values, and what is it from all of that has led you now to go, do you know what, I've had all these experiences, that's it, where do your values and things like that sit in, so this is something that you're passionate about doing now? Basically it's the learning from all of that I'm asking about.
Yeah, I remember, probably 15 years. I did not have this thing inside of me that wanted more for a long time. Like, I didn't have that all my life. That only happened after my world started falling apart. I began to have that feeling. And wanting to use what I've experienced to help other people. And it's important to me that a lot of this, in a way, I've walked alone. And we live in a world where aloneness is happening all around us. And so I don't want people to have to navigate such loss by themselves. And, faith is still important to me. though as the older I get, the less answers I have around that, and I think it has to do with how we each personally feel, and it's about loving people.
Yeah.
Because I mean, if you're Christian, now Christians wouldn't necessarily agree with me on this, but everything, Christ isn't everybody. The good people and the not so good people. So we have that all in common.
Mm.
Is that there's a connection that we could connect to people. We don't need to have to agree with what they do, but it's about love.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess using what I have learned in life. It's not, things aren't black and white. Things aren't right or wrong. You gotta hold both.
There's lots of gray areas, and
Yeah.
there isn't a black and white answer or a this or a that. And polarizing doesn't actually really help in the long term. We have to look at the whole unique experience of each individual. And like you said, it's all about love at the end of the day. We're all humans. And I believe, like you said, we're all connected
Yeah.
through that kind of experience, I think before we can
I
even
find it a
speak,
bit, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think before we even speak and even can work out our own thinking, I think there's this inbuilt moral compass in all of us until it gets wiped away by other things and socialization and all of that kind of thing. I think there is that deep-seated kernel of truth that we all have a moral compass, and maybe that is that connection to Christ that you talked about.
Yeah, well, growing up as Christian, we had the verse in the Bible that says, love your neighbor as yourself. Well, finally, I realized, well, you can't love your neighbor if you don't love yourself. Nobody talks about loving yourself because that would be prideful, that would be wrong, that would be whatever, selfish, self-centered, but you can't give if you don't love yourself.
It says it in the reading, doesn't it? Love your neighbor as yourself. So if you don't love yourself, then you're going to love them in the same way you don't love you.
Well, yeah, exactly.
The clue is in the sentence, isn't it? Yeah. So
Yeah,
actually
exactly.
start from that point and then go backwards. Yeah. Don't start from
Yeah,
that point and you've got nothing to give. So you're not going to give well.
no.
Start from that point and move backwards into
No, and
loving
if you're at all judgmental, and that's the thing I find so interesting now in my life, because I was this good little girl and followed all the rules and didn't want to ever deviate from the rules. I mean, looking back, I was one of the most judgmental sort of people around, because if you didn't perform the way the church said, or the way we did things, then you were, I guess, going to hell, basically. So I find it very fascinating that, my life, like when my divorce happened, basically, my life went up in smoke like this. And when I came down, I was outside of the church walls, kind of thing. And
Mm.
I've become this, I can hardly imagine myself not being judgmental,
Mm.
because that's who I was. But people tell me that I'm not really, so I guess that's encouraging.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Wow. What a story. So what would what would a session with you look like when, if I was coming to see you? How would that, in a nutshell, how would that actually go?
Well, you can either start with, I have some free resources on there. If you're not ready to talk to me, you can go onto my website, and there's some free resources. There are journal prompts about navigating, since I am just beginning, people will notice that it's a little more, faith-based, coming out of a faith transition. I will talk about any of these subjects that I've experienced. But just to start with, I don't have something for every experience. But so there's journal prompts. There's also free resources that they can download for free. And then there is the sessions that I have. You can you can start with a 1 hour session. Basically let me know, tell me your story and what you're experiencing, what you're going through. And I probably would, mostly listen, because people don't like to be fixed. And my main goal for me is I like to fix, and it's just like, no, we're not fixing. So yeah, listen, ask questions. And if they want to help them with next steps, there's various offerings they can purchase, 1 hour or a group of 3 hours, or I think 3 months. If they want continued support, like, what next steps could be, what helping guide them to get out of where they are or to move forward in their situation.
So it sounds very much, led by the person that comes to you of what they feel they need and how you can support them. So that's really lovely,
Yeah.
Lucille. Thank you for that. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been fascinating and it's been an honor, and I've really enjoyed the conversation, and I'm sure there could be lots more that we could talk about at another time. So I look forward to that as well.
Yes.
So if anybody's watching and either live or on replay, and you want to connect with Lucille because something she said has resonated with you, then please get in touch with her. She's in the group, so she will be around to answer your comments, answer any questions, that kind of thing. And I ask you, Lucille, to put your links in the comments under this video once we're actually finished. If you could do that, that would be wonderful. And then we'll see, where the conversation goes from there. But thank you so much for your time today. And I look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right, now let me just get rid of this live stream and we'll have a little chat.